Okay, let's unpack this. We're diving deep today into a stack of sources that really zero in on something many of us navigate every single day. Our relationship with food, our bodies, and, what progress or failure really mean. This isn't your standard diet talk.
No, definitely not. We're stepping into the framework offered by Dan Hollis, who looks beyond the surface rules and, well, into the deeper currents of behavior, emotion, and identity.
Exactly. Our mission in this deep dive is to cut through the noise and pull out the absolute most important nuggets from these sources. Think of it as like your express route to understanding Hollis's quite revolutionary perspective on things like why setbacks happen, what hunger is really asking for, and how powerful tools like medications, ones often discussed for weight loss, fit into this much bigger picture.
Yeah, it's about gaining insight not just into what to do, but really understanding why we do what we do. It offers a path to navigate challenges with more awareness and, yes, a lot more grace than, traditional methods often allow.
So let's start with a concept that trips up so many of us. Failure. We set a goal, maybe around food or weight, and inevitably life happens. We slip up, we miss a step, and instantly how does it feel?
Awful, usually.
Right, like you've failed, like you're weak, undisciplined, fundamentally broken somehow.
That feeling is incredibly powerful, and it often just stops people cold. But Dan Hollis offers a profound refrain here. He says failure isn't a stop sign, it's actually a message.
A message. Wow, okay. That completely flips the script from I'm bad to maybe what can I learn?
Exactly. He views it as a moment of feedback, just a data point. It's
That-
not a final judgment on you as a person. It's just information for you to consider and, well, use.
So if you find yourself falling back into old habits, maybe reaching for comfort food when you really intended not to, he wouldn't call that a betrayal of progress.
Not at all. He sees that kind of relapse as the brain, which loves efficiency, right? It's simply asking for the old familiar rhythm. It knows that path. And here's a really key point from the sources. If you just ignore that, stuff it down, pretend it didn't happen, that's where he says you don't just fail, you fracture.
You fracture
Uh-huh.
because you're not acknowledging the reality of what's going on, maybe the underlying need or pattern.
Precisely. He argues these breakdowns aren't proof you're weak. They are signals that the support system needs reinforcing. The system, not the person, is showing a weak point. This is why he stresses looking at these moments with curiosity instead of judgment.
Curiosity instead of judgment. Gosh, that feels lighter already. Instead of that heavy way of shame, you're sort of opening a door to understanding.
Yeah.
And this quote from the sources really hammers it home. The shame isn't in failing. The shame is in pretending you are supposed to be perfect.
That's powerful because it challenges that unrealistic standard we often hold ourselves to. Hollis suggests it's how you build grace by reaching for a better tool instead of reaching for blame when you stumble.
A better tool? Like curiosity, like asking a different kind of question about the data point.
Right.
The sources highlight his suggestion to ask, what story am I telling myself about this failure? And is that story helping me become who I want to be?
That question is the tool. It helps you step back from the immediate shame story, and actually use the information the failure provides. It allows you to observe the data point, the slip up, without letting that old narrative take over and derail you entirely.
And that perspective, that reframing, is how you can maybe start to fail forward, using any misstep, really, in any area of life as a springboard for learning rather than just a reason to give up.
Okay, so let's shift gears a bit from handling setbacks to understanding another powerful signal, hunger. We're all familiar with physical hunger, the stomach growl, maybe a dip in energy, that sort of thing.
Right, the basic signals. But Dan Hollis dives into something much deeper than just those physical cues.
Exactly. What he calls emotional hunger. It's not just about the stomach or your blood sugar levels.
How does he distinguish that then? What makes it different?
He gives this really insightful definition. Emotional hunger sounds like a craving, but it's actually a question, a need asking to be seen.
A question. So it's not just that specific food you crave, but the craving itself is pointing to something else entirely.
Yes, exactly. Think about it. Maybe you're not physically hungry at all, but you have this intense urge to eat when you're feeling lonely or bored, anxious, stressed, even sometimes overly excited. The craving isn't just for the food itself. It's a signal tied to that underlying feeling. It's all woven into the complex tapestry of our relationship with food, often developed over years and years. It's a signal from your system asking about something non-physical.
This brings us to where modern tools like semaglutide come into the picture. Right? You might know it by brand names like Ozempic or Wegovy.
Right.
It's a medication that acts like a natural gut hormone, originally for type 2 diabetes, that helps regulate appetite and how quickly food moves through your system.
Mm.
And it's been found incredibly effective for weight loss for many people.
And Dan Hollis has a really specific and, I think, crucial perspective on its role. He absolutely does not see it as the end goal, not the fix.
That's a critical distinction, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it's not the magic bullet people might think it is. How does he describe it?
He calls it a window, or sometimes a biological pause.
A pause. What exactly does that pause allow for? What happens in that pause?
This is key. By mimicking those natural signals, the medication essentially lowers the noise of physical hunger and those often overwhelming, intense cravings. And when that constant physical drive is quieted down, guess what comes forward?
Okay, the emotional part, the need asking to be seen from earlier.
Precisely. He explains that if food has been your emotional scaffolding, sort of imagine it like temporary support beams holding you up when difficult feelings or situations arise. When those intense physical cravings are lessened by the medication, that scaffolding is suddenly less available, and it can make you feel very, well, exposed.
That sounds incredibly vulnerable and maybe pretty uncomfortable too.
It can be, yes, absolutely. But Hollis frames this exposure not as a problem, but as the opportunity. He says, that's okay, that's the work. It's where the real change begins.
Okay.
The medication doesn't do the emotional work for you, it just clears the path so you can actually see it and do it.
Wow. So the medication isn't solving the underlying emotional hunger, it's just reducing the intensity of the physical drive, which kind of makes the emotional layer unavoidable in a way.
Exactly. And this is why he makes this powerful statement. It really stood out in the sources. Most people aren't failing semaglutide. They're failing to prepare for what comes after it.
Meaning, failing to recognize that the pause is really an invitation to face and work with that emotional landscape that was maybe hidden or just managed by food before.
That's exactly it. Recognizing the pause is the work, in a sense.
So, okay, if this medication provides a window and makes you feel exposed to your emotional needs, how does Dan Hollis teach people to actually use this pause effectively? It can't be easy.
Well, his framework is all about learning in this newfound quiet space. It's about separating signal confusion, basically, getting better at distinguishing, is this a physical need right now, or is it an emotional one?
And then it's not just about blindly following whatever urge comes up.
Right. He teaches people to observe the craving, not obey it. It's like practicing mindfulness around the urge itself. The goal isn't to white-knuckle it and ignore it, but to pause and try to decode what that hunger really means. What is that craving really asking for? Is it comfort, distraction, maybe connection?
It really emphasizes that he's not saying don't use the tool, the medication, but understand its true purpose in this particular context.
Absolutely. He's definitely not anti-medication. He sees its incredible strength as giving you time, just sheer time that maybe wasn't available when the physical cravings were so loud and constant. Time to reflect, reset, rewire.
And that leads to another standout quote from the source material. I thought this was great. Semaglutide isn't the solution to emotional eating. It's the silence that lets you find one.
Yes. And that silence, while potentially uncomfortable initially, as we said, is described as incredibly clarifying. It takes away the loudest signal so you can finally hear the quieter, deeper questions your system is asking.
Which beautifully segues into a deeper insight Hollis offers about the origin of this emotional hunger.
Yeah.
It's not just about momentary feelings, is it? There's something more foundational.
No, not just fleeting feelings. He connects it fundamentally to what he calls identity disconnection.
Identity disconnection. Okay, break that down for us. What does that mean?
He suggests that when people feel disconnected from who they authentically are, or maybe aren't living a life that feels true to them, maybe their values aren't being honored, their passions are ignored, or their boundaries are non-existent, food can kind of step in as a substitute. It becomes a way to cope with that underlying misalignment, or perhaps fill a void where authentic self-expression or connection should be.
Ah, so the emotional hunger isn't just a quick response to a bad day. It could be a symptom of a more chronic feeling of being off track from your own true path.
Exactly. And this is where he introduces perhaps his most core principle, really central to his work. You don't hold on to weight loss with discipline. You hold on to it with alignment.
Alignment, not sheer willpower. Wow, that feels so counter to the typical narrative around weight and food, doesn't it?
It really is. It's shifting the focus from just controlling behavior through discipline, which is often temporary, to ensuring your life and your actions are actually in alignment with who you truly are and who you want to be. If you're out of alignment, using willpower alone against those deep-seated needs or disconnects is like, well, trying to hold back a flood with just your hands. It's exhausting and often futile. The real work, he says, is about addressing that identity disconnection, replacing the old, often subconscious story that food is needed to cope or substitute.
Replacing the story, not just the snack.
Yeah.
That's a really potent way to think about it. Really gets to the heart of it.
So bringing these threads together now, we see how reframing failure as feedback, understanding emotional hunger as a question that maybe stems from identity disconnection, and using a tool like semaglutide aren't really separate concepts at all. They weave together quite naturally.
Yeah, the medication isn't the destination. It's more like an invitation. An invitation, maybe amplified by the silence it provides, to use that window to focus on those deeper layers, the emotional questions, the identity work, the real hunger, not just the number on the scale.
It prompts those crucial questions Hollis encourages asking yourself in that quiet space. What am I really hungry for? What needs support now that food is no longer filling in the gaps?
And addressing that emotional hunger, that need for alignment, requires a radically different toolkit than just diet rules or punishment for slip-ups, which is what we often default to.
Absolutely. As Dan Hollis summarizes it, healing emotional hunger requires empathy, not judgment, awareness, not rules, and curiosity, not punishment. It's a path built on self-understanding, not just self-control.
Which makes it crystal clear that semaglutide isn't being presented here as some kind of miracle pill that just fixes everything automatically.
No, definitely not. But it can absolutely be a miracle pause, a pause that gives you the necessary space and time to quiet the physical noise and maybe finally hear the truth about what you're really hungry for, allowing you to choose a new direction based on awareness and alignment.
This deep dive into Dan Hollis's framework really does shift the perspective, doesn't it?
Yeah.
From just managing weight to understanding the really intricate dance between our bodies, our emotions, and our identity.
It's quite a journey, from seeing failure as shame to embracing it as essential feedback, recognizing emotional hunger as a question, searching for a deeper answer, and understanding how a tool like semaglutide can provide that powerful pause to finally hear the question and, begin the work of alignment.
And thinking about that idea of a pause created by quieting a familiar coping mechanism. Well, it makes you wonder, doesn't it? How quieting any default behavior or crutch in your life might reveal deeper underlying needs or disconnections that are just waiting to be addressed, maybe completely unrelated to food. What else might you be truly hungry for?
That's a powerful lens to turn on other areas of life. Absolutely.
And as the source material wisely suggests, maybe share this perspective with someone else who might be walking this journey too.
Yeah, good advice. Because, as Dan Hollis puts it, when the cravings stop, the truth begins.